Hi, I'm Solène Tircuir, sociologist, global health expert, and immigrant storyteller.
And I'm Sacha Ledon, entrepreneur, startup advisor, and lifelong connector of founders from every corner of the globe.
Welcome to Beyond Borders, a podcast about what it really means to build a life, a career, or a dream far from home.
Each week, we speak with people who've crossed countries and cultures, sharing the challenges, the breakthroughs, and the unexpected moments in between. That's where the real story begins. Welcome to Beyond Borders. Hello, I'm Sacha Ledon, and this is Beyond Borders, the podcast where we explore the lives and careers of immigrants who've had extraordinary journeys in the United States. Today, I'm joined by Sophie Durey, a global impact leader, investor, and entrepreneur whose career has taken her from France to Switzerland, China, Mexico, and the heart of the Silicon Valley. Sophie holds a master from Sciences Po in public international management and began her career in the nonprofit world in Paris before transitioning to impact investing in Geneva. Over more than 7 years at Quadia, she rose from investment analyst to head of impact evaluation, helping shape the firm's approach to purpose-driven capital. In 2017, she moved to the Bay Area, where she founded the Impact Evaluation Factory, supporting young ventures and VC funds in defining and executing their impact strategies. She later co-founded an innovative multi-family office for self-made entrepreneurs, and today she serves as partner at Tamar Ventures and venture director at Tamar Capital, where she invests in early-stage startups and leads their founder education and support initiatives. Sophie's journey spans continents, industries, and impact models. She embodies what it means to build a purpose-driven career as an immigrant in the U.S. So I'm very excited to talk with you today. Sophie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So jumping right in, you spent a year studying in Australia when you were younger. How did that experience of living abroad and studying abroad shaped you personally and professionally? And did it kind of plant the seeds of later your bigger move to the US as well?
Well, I would say, it was very much the beginning of everything. Honestly, like it was the furthest away that I could travel to. So I think that experience alone was just, very much an adventure. And it kind of started my love of traveling and just, I made it clear for me that I wanted to experience different cultures and kind of integrate that to my life. So I think it was kind of transformative that way. And it was just a fun year because, I was a student. I wasn't, it wasn't a lot of responsibility in terms of what I was doing every day. And it was just a kind of a good time meeting new people and being a little bit on my own as well. So it was just a very fun founding ground for my life in the future. But I have to say that I was lucky enough that I traveled a lot with my family as well. So I think there was that bug already. In me that was kind of planted very early on.
Yeah, I totally understand that. But it is quite a different experience between traveling and living extended period of time, right? So,
Yeah,
and Australia
completely.
is the furthest place from France you could go, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think the first time living on your own, being abroad so far away, there was I think it was 11 hours difference in time. So just trying to find a time to reach out to friends and family in France, it was just like a whole different organization. So I remember feeling very kind of dissociated from my, kind of the life that I knew, which was such a freeing experience. It was a very, very interesting time.
It kind of kept going, I guess, with you going abroad, and you eventually moved from Paris to Geneva to work at impact investment firm Quadia, and you were working in a nonprofit in Paris, so you were working in impact in a different kind of way. How did you see that shift your view on how impact can be created between nonprofit work, investing? It seemed like two different worlds, but kind of maybe getting to the same thing.
Yeah, the transition was interesting because I did my studies to work in nonprofits, and my idea was to work with the Red Cross. I wanted to be in the field. I was very much I wanted to be a humanitarian kind of. I had all these ideals of changing the world, but really through the nonprofit world, and that was kind of my definition of impact at the time. And so I worked for this nonprofit in Paris. I was on the advocacy side of things. And I remember talking to the financial department and kind of looking at how things are organized within the nonprofit. And it was very standard at the time. It wasn't just this nonprofit, but basically, I would say 70 to 80% of the donations would go to overheads and kind of admin costs and everything else. And 20, 30% would go to the field. And I remember thinking, this is not efficient at all. And if you really want to have an impact or you want to kind of change the world in a way, I think there's other models that could work. And as it happens, I come from a family of, there's like finance people working in finance. So I had that background as well, where I was like, how do you kind of bridge the two worlds? And I didn't want to go into finance properly because I was very idealistic that way. I was like, no, this is the bad side of things. But then I got this opportunity to work for Quadia, which was kind of bridging the two worlds, which is finance, being very efficient with money, looking for performance, doing proper venture capital, but also doing it in a way that you're investing in companies that are doing good for the environment and society. So it was kind of that, kind of nice transition that happened. And then, yeah, it just kind of started my career in that field from there.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's true you always hear of all these nonprofits having such huge overhead compared to what the
Yeah,
funds are used for in terms of helping people.
yeah.
What was the balance at Quadia? Was it, the other way around? Was it 80% invested,
Mhm.
20% overhead? Is that
It was like like it's very much like 100% impact. So the people that started Quadia, they're very much purists in the sense of,
Mm,
what they were doing with impact investing at the time. It was still very nascent, but they had this idea that you can use finance to do good in the world. And what they really were good at is showing and kind of they taught me that, but I think there's performance in having an impact. So it's kind of looking at different layers of things that you add to the investment process. And so in that context, you're investing in a business that is profitable or that is looking to be profitable. You're creating value that's financial, economical, all these aspects, but you just make sure that the mission and the strategy is aligned with these social and environmental criteria. So let's
mhm.
say one of the companies that I loved at the time that we invested in was a chocolate company based in Iceland, of all places. And what they did is it's very much like a profitable business. They're selling chocolate bars, but it's bean to, a kind of bean to bars. That's their concept. And the idea was to find the right suppliers, working with cooperatives in, Ghana and Costa Rica and all these places that were sourcing the cocoa and making sure the supply chain was fully environmentally friendly and socially friendly and having all these criteria all along the kind of the supply chain. And at the end, you have a very nice product that sells better. There's a better story, better branding around it. But what happens as well is that whenever the supply chain issues and logistics happen, where you have maybe controversies around like how people are treated in that space, or you have environmental trouble with the production of cocoa, because you've made that like you made these decisions of doing it the right way from the very get-go, it just changes the business altogether and makes it outlast other businesses that are not as good on that sense. So for Quadia and kind of what I learned then it was that it's kind of not you have to choose one or the other. Like there's no kind of trade-off.
Mm.
It's very much like if you're looking at impact as a way to improve your performance, then you're making a better investment.
Interesting. First of all, I don't think much about Icelandic chocolate. That's I don't know that one. But also, you do often think of impact investing as a trade-off, as you said, right? Like
Yep.
you're either giving up some value,
Yep.
right, of like a profitable company that can just focus on profits, or you're giving up some of the
Hmm.
impact piece. But I like the idea that it could actually help each other be better in both aspects. So after your time at Quadia, you eventually moved to the United States about, I guess, 8 years ago. What made you decide to jump across the pond and come over here?
Well, I always was fascinated by the US. I think culturally and just I would come and travel and visit the US quite a lot. And I was just like, it was kind of on my mind at some point. I was like, oh, maybe part of my, career or trajectory could be in the US. And then I had been in Geneva in Switzerland for a long time, and it was kind of time for me to step outside of my comfort zone. 7 years at Quadia, I was kind of trying to think like what would be the next step. So I was like, why not being a VC? You want to be where the action is, and obviously the US is a big part of it. So I did what a lot of people do, is put my name in the lottery process to get a green card, because I was that naive that I was like, you know what, I can just get a green card and come to the US. But it actually worked. I was one of these people that got it the first try around. So
Mm.
it kind of pushed things forward, really. It was just like a good sign for me to like take the next step. And yeah, it was just a decision of deciding where I wanted to move to. So it was either the East Coast or the West Coast. And again, being in VC, it made sense to kind of go and explore Silicon Valley, and that's how it happened. So I packed my bags and just moved to the US then.
Wow. Yeah, and amazing to get the lottery for the green card, but it does happen, of course. That's why it's
Hmm.
got to take the chance. So you did, at this point, I guess you've lived in 4 or 5 different countries for some amount of time. Did you have, specifically with the US and the Bay Area, moments of big cultural adaptation or shock, even though you've seen so many different cultures and countries?
Yeah. Yeah, because I think I came in a little bit naive again, where I felt like I knew the US because we're so exposed to US culture, generally speaking, through films and, kind of culture, like culturally, and
Mhm.
then social media and all of this. So I was like, it's going to be an easy kind of transition. I kind of know how things are done. But then moving to Silicon Valley specifically, I think at first it was just like so much happening. One of the things I remember feeling just very confused about is how things were moving so quickly. Like everything was moving so fast, so quickly, professionally, but also personally. Like people would just have this hustle culture, like they hustle all the time. And I think coming from Europe and France maybe specifically, and then obviously
And
Switzerland,
Switzerland,
which is
yeah.
very different
Definitely.
timeline. It was just like it was a big shock, I think. It's just like getting to that level of like always being on top of things and kind of always doing something new. And
Mm.
so there was that, and there was also I think the way that people present themselves and are able to like kind of grab your attention very quickly with just a few, like they're so good at
Mm.
marketing themselves, right? So I
Yeah.
remember same, like the first few months, like it took me a while, but everyone that I was meeting, they were just so interesting to me because they were so good at talking about themselves. And I was like, I feel like I've done a lot of things in my life, but I don't feel that I'm as as interesting as they are. But I think then you kind of understand that there's just a way that the storytelling behind it, and the way that they put forth all the positives and the achievements rather than kind of focusing on the things that didn't work. And it's just a very like this was a big learning for me, I think, and a
Mm.
challenge because you kind of had to adapt and be the same way as well.
Yeah, I think that's very common coming
Yeah.
from Europe, particularly to have those two kind of aspects, especially for the Bay Area, like the hustle culture and people
Yeah.
nonstop doing stuff, as opposed to France or a lot of Europe where it's a little more balanced, and definitely the kind of marketing of
Yeah.
yourself, of your career, of your company. Like Americans are amazing at that.
Yeah.
They're so good at creating the story and selling you the dream. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess you bought into the dream because you founded
Yes.
very quickly your own company. So you
Yeah.
founded the Impact Evaluation Factory.
Hmm.
Can you talk to us a bit about how that came about and why you decided to not maybe go for another VC but create your own structure? Yeah.
So I had this idea, and that's a little bit what was part of the moving to Silicon Valley as well, is that I had been on the investor side for a little while, and I obviously, at the bug, like, cut the bug as well, and was like, yeah, I can start my own thing as well, and why not doing it in Silicon Valley? It seems like everyone is doing it. Why not me? Again, very naive, but yeah, so that was kind of like, that would be something that I wanted, like that was something that I wanted to kind of set up. And it was a way for me, I think, arriving in Silicon Valley, not knowing anybody and not having a network, just like, I basically just left, packed my bags and moved to San Francisco, but I didn't have anything. So it was a way to meet people because I had something to talk about rather than just like, trying to get to meet people and not having a lot to like share. And then again, you realize when you arrive in Silicon Valley, and I don't know if it was your experience as well, but it's a universe in itself. So coming from outside, most of the time, like things that I've done in Switzerland, I felt like, when I was mentioning it to people in Europe, they were like, oh, this is quite interesting. They knew of the name, they knew of, whatever
Mm.
institution you were part of. Arriving in the US, I was no one. Like even talking about the work that I've done in Switzerland like at Quadia, which was one of the, most important impact investing firms in Europe at the time. And then coming to the US, they were like, what is this? So like kind of just going with what I had was not sufficient. So I kind of I brought that idea of providing support and kind of doing consulting work on, setting up impact measurement for early stage companies, early stage investors. And really it was a way for me to like meet people and have
Mm.
something to talk about and obviously, complement my earnings. I had some savings, but it was just a good way to kind of make it last as much as possible and set up a little bit of an ecosystem for myself.
I think that's great. I love that. I do think having something, even if it's small, as starting, it
Yeah,
really focuses your energy and your kind of who you're going to meet, what you're going to talk about, as opposed to just coming and being like, oh, I'm just figuring everything out. It gives you a little bit more, maybe, I don't know, more solid approach.
yeah, yeah.
And I do agree, coming from Europe, coming from France,
Hmm.
I went to like OSCP, is very good school there,
Very
or
good. Cool. Yeah.
like I worked in create my own nonprofit or stuff, and then you here is like, yeah, what do you do? What is that? So
Exactly. People are not waiting for us here. I don't understand.
yeah, and there
Yeah,
is a bit of a tendency to be self-focused, I think, in the
yes.
US and focused on. I also actually studied at UCLA, so like, oh, UCLA, yeah, we know that. That's
Yep.
great.
Yep.
OSCP, what? Top
What is
business
this?
school in France, whatever. So yeah, there's a bit that dichotomy of even with a big background and a lot of good experience, you're kind of restarting when you come here
Yeah,
in some
absolutely.
degree.
Yeah.
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 So you kind of started mentioning this, but were there some big challenges you faced as an immigrant? I guess kind of the cold
hmm
start of starting at zero, but were there others, and how did you overcome those?
Well, I mean, creating a network it wasn't a challenge because I feel like specifically California, people are very open and they're very, happy to meet you and they're just like so kind of optimistic and positive all the time, I feel like, and like as a first impression. But it was just an effort of like making sure that I was saying yes to kind of anything that people were suggesting to me, like going to events or meeting people through like different friends or the cousin of the friend of the kind of like extended that network very very broadly, and it was amazing. That's how I met a lot of my friends still to this day. That was definitely something. And I think there was that, and then there was the again like if not feeling defeated by the level of skills that is in Silicon Valley around you all the time. So again, they're very good at marketing, so you never really know if it's, them selling themselves a little bit too high and not really being as good as, or if it's just like this place just brings people that have amazing talents and they've just done so many great things. So you kind of have to be very good with yourself where it's like I might not be as good but I still do have value. And so I remember the first year was a little bit of me trying to balance like not feeling that I'm kind of keeping my
Mm.
confidence, continuing to like push and meet people and kind of build things here and being also humble, and you don't want to kind of go to the other way where it's like, oh, I'm so good at everything. But yeah, so I think these were kind of some of the
Yeah.
of the challenges. And I think a little bit of what I mentioned earlier, but I think the hustle culture, like you get so drawn to it. And I think we, as French people, we learn about the, kind of art de vivre. We're very good at like finding balance between things. Whereas here it was just like 24/7. And so the first few years, obviously you want to make it, but it's like to what extent, at what price. And I think it took me a while to realize this. So the first few years I was really like it was just very intense, which I don't regret. But now looking back, I'm like, yeah, if I had to do things differently, I would maybe pace myself in terms of, just being on all the time.
I think that's a great lesson. I think there's a power we can have as French people to have a balance and still have a hustle, but still to think, okay, that's not my whole identity or value as a person isn't just
Yeah.
defined by my career. And I can also just have time with my friends and family and travel.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely important.
Yeah.
I also think, I mean, it's true that I felt this too, that this place, the Bay Area, just attracts amazing people. And it's like and they're great at selling themselves. So it's a double, you're kind of competing against the best in the world, it feels like, as opposed
Mhm.
to, in France, of course, Europe, there's a lot of great, smart, talented people, but it does feel like a smaller pool in a way that here is like, oh, you're with the big sharks, the big fish. So it's yeah, tough to adapt at times. And often I think many people feel like imposter syndrome, or they feel like, oh, I'm not, all these people are amazing. What am I doing here? I mean, I've felt it. I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
It's, yeah. Everyone goes through that. I think it's something to think about.
It's interesting as well because you see also like you're surrounded by successful stories that people are kind of grabbing onto, and it feels like everyone is so successful. But when you're really looking through, kind of through the whatever the glass, you're like, okay, well, maybe not. I think we're all kind of like trying to figure it out. But I think there's this layer of, again, storytelling where it does feel that you're very, like the challenge of it is amazing, but I think it's to a point where sometimes it's like potentially at the detriment of your mental health, which is something that, is I've seen around here quite a lot.
Hmm.
And as you said, the concentration of people that have that drive to succeed is so high, even though we have this in Europe as well, but I think it's not as concentrated and to the level of ambition that you have here. I mean, the people are just like they feel like they can really change the world, and it's not like, oh, it's a dream. It's like they properly tell you, I'm going to change the world. The
Hmm.
level of ambition is unmatched.
I totally agree. And at times we only look, we have a kind of bias where we only kind of think about or look at the successful people.
Hmm.
At least I do. And working with a lot of entrepreneurs and founders, VCs and professors and people that are like often younger than I am, and that have been incredibly successful. I'm like, oh man, what am I doing? I already missed it.
Exactly.
But that's not how, you
Yeah.
got to think about the
Hmm.
broader ecosystem. And many
Yeah,
people are, lower, higher, or whatever. Everyone has
of
their own
course.
path.
Yeah.
Um, But back to your path and journey. So you moved on, keep creating your own structures, I guess. So you
Yeah.
co-founded a multi-family office with a unique model without fees or just carried interest to share. So can you tell us a bit more about the model and what kind of gap you identified you were trying to solve?
Yeah, of course. So I ended up meeting like through all these like kind of networking that I was doing at the time, meeting this team that was working on crypto blockchain. It was very much like the high, the kind of high time of
Mm.
that era. And I didn't know obviously anything about it. Still to this day, don't ask me anything about crypto and blockchain. They were obviously very successful doing this, and they were trying to figure out, like, I've made a lot of money. What am I going to do with it? And it
Mm.
kind of like resonated with a lot of different situations that they've seen around and that I had seen around as well, like in people where I had been in the world of like family offices and kind of wealth management for a while through, Quadia and everything in Switzerland, and seeing that there's a world where you can be educated and financially literate if you have this generational kind of culture of managing your money. But when you're self-made, you're just like social media influencer, a pro athlete signing a big contract, you're a young entrepreneur selling your company. You don't have that generational like kind of education and
Mm.
support in terms of what to do with your money and build that legacy. But you still have this, drive to do it and this need to do it. And specifically this young generation or like younger generation, millennials, Gen Z, they want to do it with an impact because they're like more aware of, again, social environmental kind of issues and challenges. So it was just a good, like just a good timing of like meeting this team of people that were kind of like in that situation themselves and knowing a lot of people in that situation, and me with my background in like, kind of managing money and impact. And then so we figured out that this would be a good idea to set up. And the no fee kind of only carry model was for us first to differentiate ourselves, because it was, yeah, there's so many family office
Mhm.
out there, and like what would they choose us. And then it was to show alignment. So this type of people, again, they're not used to the like standard old white dude that's like managing your money and taking management fees and just, they don't want that. It's not sexy to them. They
Mhm.
want to see that you're in the same hustle again as they are. And so this alignment of like, I'm not going to make you pay to manage your money, but however, if you win, I win, then that's very attractive. And so that's kind of how this came up. And it was obviously the kind of marketing and messaging behind it. And it was a way for us to kind of get to a few clients that were in that situation. And it was just a very, very interesting time. And again, being on the side of building that from the ground up was a very good experience as well for me.
Very cool. I'm curious, in this model, do you have a higher share of the carried interest?
So you work it out. So there was a like a standard kind of contract that we had, and then you work it out on AUMs basically, and
Hmm.
you kind of figure out this way. And then I mean, one thing that we did, because obviously we still needed to like have some cash flow to make the team run. So we did the VC model for ourselves. So we raised money for the company, for the entity itself. So we raised a little bit of money, and then we had services added to the kind of standard contract that we would have, which was just like us investing part of your AUMs into a strategy that we figured out for you, customized. But then if we were to like manage your other assets in some ways, because you had like this, they had cars and they had like they wanted to
Sure.
travel and they wanted to like whatever, kind of enjoy their lives because they had access to these resources. So then we had also these services that would kind of give us some income as to kind of operationally make the company
Makes
work.
sense. Yeah. No, it's very interesting. And so now, for the past few years, you've been at a dual role, I guess, between Tamar Ventures and Capital. Can you tell us a bit more about what you're doing today?
Yeah, so very much in line of a little bit of everything that we've talked about, but it's so Tamar Capital is a family office. We have offices in London, so part of the team is in London, and SF is the other base. We do different type of asset classes. We manage, different asset classes for the family. One of them being VC, and so I'm co-leading that with one of the partners of the family office. She's based here as well. Yeah, it's been a fun ride. It's a small team. All of us are very entrepreneurial. I think we all had at some point we did something with entrepreneurship our own way. And the culture and the background of the family is obviously very entrepreneurial as well. So there's like a little bit of like both sides that are very exciting for me when I joined was the family office, wealth management, kind of venture capital side of things where you're the investor. So it's a little bit, easier. And then you also have the entrepreneurial kind of side of things where you still have to build things for, just making sure that the family office continues to live on. And so Tamar Ventures is just a VC arm, if you will, of the family office.
And is that work still related to impact investing, or this became more pure VC?
It's, I mean, it's pure VC in a sense of like we're looking for performance. Whenever we invest in companies, it's because we do see potential for growth and scale and obviously profits at the end for all involved. But with the layer of, as long as you're doing it the right way. So impact is very much at the core of most of the decisions that we make in terms of investments. And it's first of all because we're also respecting the values of the family. This is, kind of very much embedded in the way that they do everything. They want to have a good impact on the world, but also because we do think that it's a better strategy as investors to look at companies with this impact lens. So again, like very much like VC focus, performance focus, but we will invest in companies that we do feel have a good impact on the world.
Great. So now you've seen impact from so many different perspectives, angles, countries, or nonprofit, impact investing, VC, and a lot of founder support you do now. What does impact mean to you today, and how do you see it in investing and beyond?
Yeah. I mean, it's been a journey really seeing impact and like having a definition for impact since the very beginning. I think when I started kind of to learn about impact investing and just impact in general at the beginning of my career, it was just again very nascent. Not a lot was done in that space, and so there was a lot of things to build out. Even just definitions in the field were not the same from one place to another, one organization to the other, which was kind of great because you could basically build out impact the way that you want it. However, for it to make sense, you do need standards and, frameworks and all of this. So this has been kind of interesting to see the evolution since, I would say, 2016, 2017 that I started in this world. But, or like even before, what am I saying? I was, 20,
Mm-hmm.
like 2008. But yeah, I think now my definition of impact is, because I'm looking at it from the investor side of things and I'm looking at it from the startup side of things. So I'm working with companies that are very early stage. There's not a lot of things that have been built out just yet. It's a lot of ideals, and it's a lot of potential. So it's very much about the intention of doing things the right way and how do you embed that into your strategy as a founder or operational team. And so for me, impact is about the improvement and the progress that you see along the way, and you can measure that the same way that you would do with financial aspects. So it's very much having conversation early with the companies and understanding what type of impact they want to have and how does that relate to their mission and how does that relate to the roadmap and the strategy and the milestones that are going to achieve, and then how can you support that as an investor.
Great. So take it a bit back to your background as an immigrant, and I'm sure you invest and work with a lot of immigrant founders as well.
Yeah.
What do you think immigrants bring to the venture ecosystem in the Bay
Mm.
Area?
Yeah, I for sure work with a lot of immigrants, which I think we all kind of like end up finding each other, which is very interesting. And I love that. And I think what they bring, I mean, we bring, I would say, is I think a richness in perspective, in a sense of we're bringing a different, again, perspective, different things. We've lived through different things. We come from different cultural backgrounds. And I think this is always a positive when you put it into the context of venture capital and startups and building things for people in general. So I think there's that I always love hearing about, what brought you to Silicon Valley? What brought you to entrepreneurship from where you are? How is it different doing it here from where you maybe came from, and kind of how do you bridge these two cultures? And then I would say one thing that I see a lot with people that are not like first thing American is a little bit more pragmatism or humility in the way that they approach business, if I keep it in a kind of venture capital startup world, in a sense of like I'm always extremely impressed by the way that American are ambitious, and again, like I think they're dreaming and they're thinking about things at a way different level than we are, let's say French people. Uh, but I do sometimes find that maybe immigrants, they have this realistic approach of things. They understand the ground a little bit more. They've kind of had to go through some things that might not have been the case for people that are here American and have access to the resources that they have here. So that I think would like makes them different, and I do think it's a strength to kind of have a little bit of different perspective and humility kind of brought together to build something new.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the fact that one, you took a chance to come over to a place you didn't have connections or knowledge about really, and two, the struggles that you had to go through to come here and stay here, and with visas, with family, with everything. So yeah, it makes you more flexible, adaptable, resilient, I think,
Yeah,
to some degree.
yeah.
Obviously on average, not everyone, but
Exactly. It's not like
yeah.
it's the generalization, and obviously you see that in obviously American people as well. And I think again, like they bring things that maybe as immigrant we sometimes might be too modest and we don't dream as big as, and we don't have like we're kind of risk adverse in some situation, and so there's that good balance of how do you bring the two things together. I love actually seeing teams that are very international where there's like American people with people coming from outside, because usually they're very complementary, and you see that working pretty well. But I like what you said about resilience. I think that's one thing that we always say about startups and like what makes a good founder. And usually it's being able to go through the roller coaster of what building a company means. And so resilience is like the one thing that you have to have. And so as an immigrant, I think it's kind of part of your DNA. So it makes it maybe better for you.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that's a big strength.
Mm.
that immigrants should market and put forward more.
Exactly. Exactly. Marketing.
So going back to 2017 when you decided to move over here, if you could go back to right before you came and tell yourself one piece of advice, what would you tell your younger self?
Ooh. I mean, I think a good thing is I didn't think too much when I moved. And I think that was good to kind of go in, not blind, because I did a lot of research. I prepared, I did like the whole thing. But it's still, I think I was again like a bit naive to what Silicon Valley was. From the outside, you feel like, again, you know what's going on. And then you also are part of that dream. Like you're like, yeah, I'm going to make it. It's going to be amazing. And you're kind of like, you have this unfulfilled optimism when you come here, and I think you need that to make that jump. Maybe looking back, I would be like, again, like what we mentioned earlier, like pace yourself. Like you don't like you. It's fine the way that you do things, and you
Mhm.
don't have to like change yourself too much to kind of make it the way that other people are making it. I think it's a little bit of that imposter syndrome that you mentioned. Is like I very much like I had a phase where it was just like very very difficult, but it's a good learning opportunity. And honestly, like one thing, looking back, I'm like I'm glad that I did a lot of the things that I did when I arrived, because it was such an adventure. And honestly, I'm still here. So it was, I think, in any case, very positive.
Mhm.
And now I'm American. I did the whole like citizenship process. So it's very much like I'm very much here to stay. And so I think maybe looking back, I would be like, yeah, be prepared for the journey of it and the adventure of it.
Congrats on becoming American as well. No easy path, and it takes time and effort. Actually, so on that point, you've been in many different countries. You're still a dual citizen, I guess now. So how do you feel in terms of your self identity? Do you feel American, French, European? How do you think about that?
Yeah, that's such a good question because I often think about it. When I'm in France, I never feel more American or like international than when
Hmm.
and when I'm here, I feel very like there's a good part of me is very French. I mean, first of all, my accent is always going to be there. And then a lot of obviously things that I do and my culture is very French. So it's funny, like depending on where I am, I feel like I'm a little bit of like that, like the opposite of nationality or a culture. I do feel like more of a kind of international like person. I think I left home when I was quite young. I was 18. I moved to Paris to do my studies. It was still in France, obviously, but it was kind of a big move and I was kind of young, and then moved to Australia and then did the whole like Mexico and then Switzerland and then China. And then I kind of realized like I spend more time out of France than I have spent in France. And so yeah, I do feel more international, I think. And I honestly, I love it. But I'm still very French that way, where I'm like, you know what, when I'm retiring, I'm old, I'm gonna be in France for sure. I think it's gonna be the where I'm gonna end up, even though I loved all the places that I've lived in. And there's many things, like many places that I want to visit and experience, but I think France is gonna be the end goal anyway.
Totally, I very much empathize and feel the same way of being somewhat between cultures and an outsider kind of either way. I grew up in France. I was born in the US. I came back and forth, live in London, um, and you're always a little bit different, I guess.
Yeah.
Like you're shaped by your thing. You're in France. You're like, oh, you're French, but you're not fully French. You're in America. You're American, but not fully American. And I think something you said earlier, you kind of attract or get attracted mutually to these types of people that are also international, because there's an affinity to being outside your own culture and country,
Yeah.
create some proximity. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's yeah, as you said, like you feel a little bit like an outlier, but like in a good way. And yeah, it's a fun place to be in.
So, Sophie, to just kind of wrap it all up as we're coming to the end, if you could encapsulate your experience of living and being in the US in kind of 3 to 5 words and a kind of tagline, what would they be?
I kind of want to say marketing, but I don't know. I don't know if that's what I want to leave behind. No, I would say Ambitious, that's for sure. Life-changing, um, and adventurous.
Love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Yeah. I would agree with all those. I feel the same way about this place. Sophie, thank you so much for sharing your story, your background, and chatting with me this morning. It was a great discussion. I hope you had a good time too.
Absolutely. No, thanks for having me. That was a very fun chat.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond Borders and joining us to celebrate the journeys, the successes, and the stories of immigrants making their mark in the US. If this story inspired you, please like, follow, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. You can also find more information at beyondborderspod.com. Your support helps us keep making and sharing these inspiring stories. Until next time, keep going, keep growing, and go beyond borders.